My advice to young filmmakers is to make a movie every week in Super 8 or high def, write every night, and every weekend shoot for 2 days, then go out and make another picture the next weekend, and just keep doing it.
When I was getting into photography way before I ever started with filmmaking, I used to spend hours and hours on the internet trying to find the perfect hack that would make success easier. I'd read the same blog posts over and over and watch every YouTube video I could find, but I never seemed to get anywhere. And after more than a year of that, and without really anything to show for it, I started to feel pretty terrible about myself and started to wonder if maybe I just wasn't cut out for a creative career. But eventually I realized that all of this was just a way of avoiding doing the one thing that could actually get me what I wanted.
Just do it, okay? Because you can think of 95,000 reasons why not to start a movie. That drives me crazy.
So this video is all about how I broke out of that rut and the strategies you can use to stop being lazy and make progress on your creative goals. And if you're a creative but feel like you're not doing enough, I made this video for you. So a lot of what feels like creative laziness really boils down to overthinking. For me, that meant researching ideas for photo stories obsessively, like checking the location of the sun at different times of the day and reading a ton of news articles and consuming every top 5 tips video I could find. Eventually, I'd thought about it so much that it kind of started to feel like I'd actually gone out and shot the thing, but the truth was that I hadn't taken a single photo. Actually, for my first ever project, which was about the last remaining shanty town in Seoul, South Korea, I pretty much didn't do anything, like ever. I think I physically went there one time for like 2 hours, and I was so nervous to photograph the strangers that I spent most of my time trying to shoot from the hip while lurking behind a telephone pole. And whenever I looked at the 8 photos I came back with and compared them to the photographers I admired most in the world, I just feel terrible about myself. Deep down, I knew the real problem was that I was thinking too much and doing too little. I tricked myself into thinking that researching was the same thing as doing, and I let myself off the hook for not shooting by blaming my brutal work schedule. And it was an awful schedule, I'm not gonna lie. I worked 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then again from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. So it's not like I was just swimming in free time.
That sucks.
So whenever I spent the entirety of my 5-hour break just doom scrolling, or like the whole weekend on YouTube instead of taking photos, it seemed like I had a valid reason to let myself off the hook. Your job sucks, you deserve to chill. It's not your fault, it's the school, blah, blah, blah. Month after month would go by and I hadn't done anything but read more and think more about gear I could buy, and that inner voice always found a way to justify it. And I don't want to diminish how hard some people's schedules are, especially if there's kids involved, but I was definitely lying to myself. And that wouldn't have been such a big deal if it didn't make me feel so bad all the time. Like, I really loved the idea of becoming a photojournalist, and I felt like I'd be good at it if only I could get some traction. But at the same time, I wasn't doing anything about it, and the more time I wasted, the more I felt like a lazy failure. Any of this sounding familiar? The only thing that would have actually helped me improve as a photographer was to go out and take photos, but I did literally everything I could to avoid it. I even made a whole website for myself, complete with like a photographer's bio section and all that stuff, and this is back in the day before Squarespace or whatever made this easy. And even though I had almost no work to show on it, I just kept looking for ways to improve my SEO through keywords or whatever.
Come on, man, really?
Basically anything to avoid just doing the things that would actually make a difference. Eventually, I was so desperate, I sunk all my life savings into a workshop with a photographer I really liked, and that changed everything. Not because he snapped his fingers and suddenly I got good, because I still sucked for a long time after that. No, the reason it was so helpful is because he forced me to confront the thing that scared me most, going out in the world to do the work. On the first day of the workshop, I was all set to sit down and have these deep talks about the industry and which editors I should reach out to first, which we did for a little bit, but pretty soon he realized what the issue was. So he told me to go get my camera, and then we jumped in a rickshaw, and this was in Bangladesh, and we went into the old city and just started shooting. At first I didn't know what to do, so I just kind of followed him around, but eventually I felt a bit silly and started taking pictures too, even though it was awkward. We only stayed out for a few hours that day, but it changed everything.
I think today I shot way too many pictures. I shot like 700 pictures or some ridiculous number.
I wasn't learning about documentary photography or making plans for the big project I do one day. I was actually out in the world and taking action. When the workshop ended 10 days later, I stayed behind in Dhaka and kept doing the same thing, but by myself. It wasn't comfortable or fun really, but I was doing the thing. And after a few weeks of that, I felt like a totally different person. I pulled out of grad school and spent the next 8 months traveling around Asia alone, building a portfolio. I shot 6 or sometimes 7 days a week, even if it was only for an hour or two, but I made sure I was prioritizing action over everything else. Not posting about it or reading about it, but actually doing it. And what do you know? I got better. It took time, but within about 2 years, I published a photo on the front page of the New York Times and was getting hired enough to support myself full time. And it was all downstream of action. Maybe right now you're thinking, well, that's all well and good, but I'm not in a position to take an expensive workshop. And that's fair, but it's also just another way of avoiding action. Since then, things have gone pretty well for me. I had a nice little photojournalism career, and then I transitioned into documentary film production, where I still work as a cinematographer now. Much later, I started up this YouTube channel, which has also grown a lot more than I ever expected. But the one thing that all these successes have in common is that I did them. I wasn't naturally gifted at any of these things. I mean, just watch the first few videos on this channel and you'll see that pretty clearly. What's going on, YouTube? Today we're going to talk about everyone's favorite depressing topic, failure. And my first short films were so bad, I've since scrubbed them from the internet. But I got better and better until I didn't suck anymore. And all of that was downstream of the same process. I started one day and then I kept going. That's it. And that's exactly what so many unsatisfied creatives are not doing. And this is coming from someone who used to make every excuse in the world to avoid taking action. Trust me, there is no other way. And once you start, you'll feel so much better.
The first mechanical casualty of a river's tale, I dropped my camera in the river while trying to climb into a fishing boat.
All right, so you get the point. Action is good. Fine. Great, that's easy to say. But why is it so hard and how can we stack the deck in our favor? Luckily, there are a bunch of small changes you can make to your habits and mindset that will make doing things a lot less scary. It took me years to figure out what worked for me, but the longer I do this stuff, the more I realize that it's actually a lot easier than you might think. That's a really good starting point because one of the things that lazy creatives do is make things harder than they need to be. This isn't about laying out your gym clothes at night or anything like that, but when I talk to early career filmmakers during consultation calls, one of the first things I run into again and again is that they're thinking